Welcome to Boomer Being. Today's topic, Boomer Yoga. And we're going to have a demonstration by an accomplished yoga instructor, Diana Kiesel. Diana teaches classes and is co-owner at Yang's Fitness and Wellness in Andover, Massachusetts. As a guest participant in Diana's yoga class, I was impressed by her use of demonstration, descriptive language, and flawless technique to enable everyone in the class to be successful, regardless of their level. So stay tuned to learn about yoga that everyone can do. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you, Leslie.
So tell us, why should a baby boomer do yoga?
Well, I think everyone should actually practice yoga, but more particularly baby boomers, because I would categorize baby boomers in three categories, if you would. One would be, the population that's pretty sedentary, and yoga is very accessible for anyone, as you said, but for sedentary people to get the circulation going. If the circulation, is going, then the body begins to heal itself. It begins to rejuvenate itself. So if you're sedentary, you should absolutely be participating in yoga. Then there's the general population, the average, person that perhaps does exercise a little bit, or is not a super athlete, but also not sedentary. Life takes its toll on you. You work every day, you have certain repetitive actions and motions, so yoga helps to bring balance back into the body. Then you have baby boomers that are athletes. Particularly athletes find that the overuse of certain body parts really could benefit from any type of yoga practice. So I think everybody should participate in yoga, but more so the baby boomers.
Thank you. So can you tell us a little bit more about the physical and mental benefits of yoga?
Absolutely. In terms of physical benefits, the biggest one that most people see is flexibility. Flexibility is huge. You can be strong but not flexible, and then you're prone to injury, and you can be flexible and not strong and also be prone to injury. So flexibility is one of the biggest ones that people think of when they hear or see yoga. There's also benefits in terms of balance, coordination. There's a list of positive physical benefits, but more particularly the mental benefits that you can't find in some of the other types of exercises, like reducing stress. And who's not stressed? So in terms of finding exercise as a stress-reducing exercise, but also does not stress the body, is one of the big benefits of yoga. Also, body awareness. A lot of people are not very aware of where their body is within space, and yoga really helps to teach you body awareness. So those are probably the key big benefits I would find for a person to partake in yoga.
Yeah, that's very inspirational. So you hear of different types of yoga. I know there are many. Can you summarize the more popular types?
Absolutely. Ashtanga is a popular form of yoga that people normally see and hear, and that's a very athletic form of yoga. And power yoga is a subset of Ashtanga yoga. So sometimes you will hear someone speak about power and Ashtanga yoga, and they use it synonymously. So the power yoga or Ashtanga yoga class, again, is a more vigorous style or type of yoga, and it doesn't mean that a baby boomer cannot start with an Ashtanga or power yoga program, but just know that that will be a more athletic style. Then there are other styles that are more meditative, like a Kundalini style of yoga, which is definitely a lot of breath work. You will also hear of hot yoga classes where the yoga class starts at roughly 110 degrees, and you're looking at a Bikram yoga style. If you ever hear Bikram, you're talking about a hot yoga.
Okay.
And Bikram is a series of 26 postures that you always practice in a certain sequence. Benefits to that is that some people really like a regimented yoga class where when they come to class, it's always the same poses each time, so they're not surprised by something different. Then you'll hear Hatha yoga, Kripalu yoga. Those are all general styles of yoga. And I always find that even within each style, there are instructors that teach those styles very differently. So a person can look into different styles of yoga, but then experience different instructors. I always say try a variety of different styles, and you'll find one that works for you, and then you will enjoy.
Good to know. So you mentioned hot yoga, of course. Would there be benefits, particularly for this demographic, in doing hot yoga?
There's two schools of thought. Some definitely believe that hot yoga has its benefits, such as increases flexibility, helps you detox, any benefits that you would find of being in a heated room. There's the school of thought where the hot yoga may not be so beneficial, particularly for baby boomers or females, because of menopause. A lot of women that are going through menopause are already hot. They find it very hard for them to sweat, very hard for them to be in a room that is hot. So in general, heated yoga, either you're a person that can withstand the heat, and if that's the case, then give that a try. But if you're a person that cannot withstand the heat, it becomes a little bit more of a distraction to you. Right. Therefore, you're not able to really focus on the yoga practice itself.
That makes sense. So how would the average person, maybe they've never done yoga and they're intrigued now, how do they get started?
I would say look for a class that is a beginner's class. There are some, studios that will offer a beginner's yoga, or at least look for an instructor that can teach in progression. So if you're coming to what we would call a general public class, the instructor should be able to take a person who's never taken a yoga class before and be able to teach the class that will allow that person to be able to participate. There may be some things that person may not be able to do in terms of progressions, but at least there's something that they can actually participate in.
Excellent to know. So again, the audience is a great deal of baby boomers, and I'm wondering, as an instructor, what is your difference in methodology when you're teaching to this demographic? It might be a little bit different from just the general population.
There is. One would be speed of the class. My general rule of thumb is looking out at the population and seeing especially the baby boomers. My assumption is that the speed may not be as quick or as rapid. It would be speed. It would also be certain poses. There are certain poses that I probably would not even instruct knowing the limitations, such as shoulder limitations, back limitations, and those would be the different aspects that I would look at in terms of teaching a class to a certain population.
That's very important, and it's good that you're so keyed in on that.
Well, yoga is supposed to help improve a person's health and not injure them.
Right. So we're very fortunate now. We're going to have a demonstration, and I'm wondering if it's possible, if you can speak a little bit about why the poses that you demonstrate are beneficial for this age group.
Absolutely. Would be happy to do so.
Fabulous.
Now you've heard a little bit about yoga, but where do you go? What do you bring? What do you wear? You can wear anything that's comfortable. So for women and men, you want to wear something that could be tucked inside your pants and not a loose shirt or a short shirt, because I will demonstrate to you a downward facing dog, which is a very popular yoga pose, that if you had a short shirt on, you'd end up what I call fighting with your shirt. In terms of what you would wear below your hips, for gentlemen, if you're wearing shorts, I would wear tighter fitting, maybe bike shorts with other shorts underneath, because you'll notice that I'll come into a pose that will have my behind somewhat higher than the rest of my body. Therefore, you want to make sure that everything is appropriately covered. Whether or not you choose to wear long pants or short pants, it's totally up to you. And you'll also notice today that I'm in my bare feet. We practice in our bare feet so we have traction on our mat. So beneath my feet, you'll notice I have a mat that's roughly about 72 inches, which is a standard length of a yoga mat. For very tall people, about 6 feet, you would probably want an extended mat, and I'll demonstrate why you would want that if you're a taller person. Some yoga studios do have mats that you can borrow. You can show up with your own mat, and I recommend that if you're going to practice yoga to really invest in a really good sticky mat. So the purpose behind a particular yoga mat is so that it helps you with traction. If you're finding that you are slipping on your yoga mat, sometimes yoga mats are very slippery. I would toss it and really invest in a good mat. There are different heights of yoga mats or thicknesses of yoga mats. In particular with baby boomers, we've had a lot of things go on with our knees. So you have issues with being on your knees and the yoga mat not being thick enough. I will show you some alternatives to how you can practice with one mat but be able to be comfortable on your knees. You'll also notice I'm holding on to a couple of props. This is known as a yoga block, and a yoga block can be anything. It doesn't have to be specifically a block like this. Grab anything that you're practicing at home that will help you bring the floor up to you. You'll also notice I'm holding a yoga strap. A yoga strap can be a canvas belt, it could be a towel, and a yoga belt is great because it also does what we call loops itself, so you can actually connect it. And sometimes you want to loop it to be able to help you with certain poses and certain alignment. If you have it looped, you can definitely gauge whether or not your arms are shoulder distance apart, or perhaps sometimes you can't quite reach your foot. Therefore, you can use your yoga strap to elongate your arms, and I will demonstrate that towards the end. So that's all you need for your yoga class, and we'll get started with a couple of poses that I think are particularly important for baby boomers. One is, if you notice how you normally stand, or most of us normally stand, remember yoga brings body awareness, so after practicing a little bit, you'll be more aware of how you are standing. Most people generally stand with their fronts of their shoulders rounded forward. That's how we work, that's how we play, that's how we perform a lot of our activities. So therefore, it creates a lot of stress in the upper back, neck, and shoulders. So I'm going to come down to the floor and show you something that's really particularly great for your neck and your shoulders and your back. It's called cat and cow. So as I come down onto the floor, I'm going to plant my hands nice and flat on the mat. I'm going to pull my shoulders about an inch behind the heel of my hands with my knees underneath my hips. And as I begin to squeeze my chest forward between the gateway of the arms, I'm now lengthening the upper back. Then I'll tuck my chin, drop my tail, lift the upper back as high as I can, and relax my chin. I'm stretching the upper back, but also elongating the lower back. And I'll start to add breath to that. So in the inhale breath, I want to find length as I pull my chest forward, really finding a nice length across the upper back. And then as I exhale, I'll drop my tail, make my tailbone very heavy, and tuck my chin, and really arch the upper back to the ceiling. So you notice right now I'm on the palms of my hands. And a lot of people normally tell me at this point, I feel pressure in my wrist. My wrists really, are not feeling great or kind in this position. There's also modifications to cat and cow. So I'm going to take half of that and drop down onto my elbows or my forearms. You can also perform the same action on my forearms. I'll relax my chin. I'll still pull my chest through the gateway of my arms, so the range of movement is a little bit smaller, but I can still also find the same benefits of the lower back stretch and the upper back stretch on my forearms. So don't forget that a lot of yoga is about the breath pattern. So usually on the inhale breath, you want to find elongation. On the exhale breath, you want to soften and think about lowering or releasing. So this is really, really beneficial to anybody who has any neck, shoulder, or perhaps even lower back tension. And as I come back onto the palms of my hands, I'm going to spread my hands nice and wide. And you always want your palms to be nice and flat on the floor with your fingers spread wide. I'm going to widen my knees just a little bit. And as I slowly lead with my tailbone, I tilt my tailbone up, I relax my chin. I'm going to slowly drop my hips towards my heels. And very typical of most people, their hips are tight. So I'm going to demonstrate someone with tight hips right now. Perhaps this is as far as I can go back, and it's not very relaxing because right now I'm having to hold my head up, and if my hips were tight, my hips are probably screaming right now. So this is where your yoga blocks can come into play. So perhaps I can rest my forehead on a yoga block. Suddenly that becomes very, very releasing and relieving to my shoulders. I'll stretch my arms out in front, and I'll try to drop my chest to the floor, make my belly heavy. So this is what we call a modified child's pose. A full child's pose, I would release my block from my forehead, and I'll slide my hips all the way down and back and lower my forehead all the way to the floor. This pose, known as child's pose or balasana, is a resting pose. So if you find yourself coming to a yoga class and the instructor is asking you to come to a resting pose, they're probably talking about child's pose. So from child's pose, we can move into a pose that's very universal that you will see in a lot of yoga classes, and it's very unlikely that you would come to a yoga class and not see this pose. It's called downward facing dog. So from child's pose, I'm going to tuck my toes underneath me, straighten my arms, push the floor away from me, then I'll start to lift my knees and float my knees up.
If I'm a person with very, very tight hamstrings, the back of my legs are very tight, you're noticing right now that my knees are bent deeply. I'm going to keep my knees bent deeply and push the floor away from you. You just notice that my arms just lengthen away from the mat. I'm relaxing my chin so there's absolutely no tension in my head. And I'm getting a great stretch across the upper back, shoulders, but as a bonus, I'm now strengthening my upper body. The next progression from this is to lift high onto the balls of my feet, and I usually cue this as come onto your tippy toes. Once I come onto my tippy toes, I'm going to tilt my tailbone up, and I may lower one heel and bend the opposite knee. So if my calves are tight, I'm now finding the stretch along my left calf, and I might come back up on my toes, and I'll switch to the other side. So we call this walking your dog. So on the inhale breath, I'm going to lift up, and on the exhale breath, I'm going to lower down. And if I'm ready, I'm going to lift high onto the balls of my feet, push the floor away from me, find that length in my upper body, keep my tailbone lifted, and you're noticing my heels slowly melting down. So your heels never have to touch the floor, but it's the direction of the heels down and the tailbone up that will stretch the entire back of your legs. So your legs are very active here. And notice right now, I'm just relaxing my chin. I'm trying to bring my ears right inside my arms. So when I'm here, I'm really thinking about pushing the floor away from me. I'm going to take one more inhale breath. I think I'm going to slowly look forward. I'm going to drop my knees down to the floor. Once I come down, I'm going to use my blocks again. I'm going to place them to either side of my mat. So this is where the blocks replicate the floor. So if I'm a very tight person, being here may not allow me to bring one of my feet forward. So I'm going to raise myself further away from the floor. I'm going to take one foot and walk it forward. Once I step forward, I'm going to shift my weight forward, aligning the knee over the heel, but my back knee is as far away from the front heel as I can get it. Then I'm going to start to lower my hip to the floor, but then watch the fronts of my shoulders. I'm going to roll the shoulders down and back. I'm going to lift the sternum, relax my chin. I'm stretching my hip flexor on my right side. So oftentimes when we sit a lot, we have tight hip flexors, and tight hip flexors really contribute to lower back pain and strain. And I also mentioned earlier that we don't all have healthy knees. So a lot of my students have a very difficult time staying on their knee. So that's where I tell them that this is where your block can become your friend again. I'm going to adjust my back knee. I'm going to come up onto the block, and now the block is helping me cushion the back knee. So I might lift up, and if I want to increase what I'm feeling across the hips, I may sweep my arms up, tuck my tail, lean slightly away from the front wall. And if I really want to exaggerate this even more, I might look up, lift my sternum, and I may even add a twist. As I come out of my twist, I'll lower my hands to the floor. And if I'm on the block, I'll pick up my back knee, remove the block, and if I'm able to, I'll slide this front foot back. And remember, we're going to be kind to our body. So if I exit out of a pose and I feel like I need to rest, I'm going to sit back in my child's pose again. And when I'm ready, I'm going to come back up. Always looking to see that my hands are parallel. If my hands are not parallel and one hand is far forward of the other, and I come up, my shoulders will be out of balance. So you always want to look at your hands and also look at your feet. When they are parallel and you lift up, then you're pretty guaranteed that your shoulders and your hips are parallel. So I'm pressing back again into that downward facing dog. And sometimes we'll come into a standing pose. You can get there in a number of ways. One could be from downward facing dog, where I will step a foot forward. Ideally, this foot comes all the way to this hand, but that's not ideal. So if I step forward and the foot doesn't quite get there, I might use the hand to propel the foot forward. Alignment. I might drop my heels so the heels align. I might heel arch my feet. So I'm going to come to a heel arch alignment, and I'm going to help myself up, and I'm going to make sure my blocks are here so when I'm ready to use them, they're there for me when I'm ready to come up. So demonstrating being able to use the blocks to come up. First I want to come up, find myself that I'm stable here, and perhaps I still need my hands, so I'm going to climb up my leg. So once I come up, oftentimes we're a little unstable, so take a moment to find your stability. I've chosen to go heel arch alignment, which means my back arch lines up with my front heel. And oftentimes when we come up in this manner, you'll notice that my front hip is lower than my back hip. I'm going to correct that by dropping my back hip, lifting my front hip. I'm going to try to maintain the hips parallel to the floor and start to bend my front knee. So when we talk about alignment, we want to make sure that the yoga pose is helping you and not hurting you. A way in which this pose over time could injure you is the alignment of your front knee. Oftentimes it tends to sway inwards. So you want to make sure that kneecap lines up with your second toe, and we also want to make sure that the knee does not surpass the toe. So if I can bend deeply, I want to adjust my foot. So as I adjust my foot and drop down, I'm going to send one arm forward, one arm back. And this pose is known as Warrior Two. And as I inhale out of my Warrior Two, I may bring my hands back down. I might step my foot together. And I'll go into a demonstration of something that we can do on the floor. And as I come down and have a seat, we haven't talked about the hamstrings yet, back of the legs. Oftentimes, the back of the legs are really tight. I'm going to come into a reclined position. So as we slowly recline back, or maybe we don't recline back, if I can't reach the back of my legs, I might use a strap. So if I use a strap, I might lie back, and if I lie back, I would actually extend my heel forward, or a seated hamstring could be here. I'll fold one leg in, sit tall, and if I can't reach my foot, that's what my strap is for. So I can slowly tip my chest forward towards the thigh. Now I'm trying to find that length across the back of my legs. So remember to breathe. As I inhale, I'm going to lengthen. As I exhale, I'm going to soften. And I would perform the same stretch on the other side. So that's a demonstration of how you can use a yoga strap. We always usually end any yoga practice with what we call relaxation, or shavasana. Shavasana is your corpse pose. Traditionally, you would lie back onto your back, but oftentimes it's uncomfortable for people because of lower back issues or lower back pain. So demonstrating how we could end a yoga class is seated up on top of one or two blocks. And the benefits of sitting on top of a block, I've elevated my sit bones, so if I cross my ankles, my knees can drop open a little bit more freely. If I rock forward, I'm going to lift the flesh of my buttocks off my sit bones. I'm going to sit nice and tall. So as I inhale, I'm going to lift the sternum, drop my hands in my lap, and before I close my eyes, I'm going to look at the fronts of my shoulders. I'm going to make it a practice to always draw the fronts of my shoulders back, find my chin parallel to the floor, and then I'll close my eyes. Trying to block out any distractions, listening to my breath.
Thank you so much for that amazing demonstration.
You're very welcome.
I'm sure our Boomer audience will find that beneficial.
I hope so.
Thank you. So I've been wanting to ask you, can you share with us your greatest success story in terms of your yoga students?
I sure can. It was one of my students named Marianne. Hi, Marianne, if you're out there. Marianne had chronic knee issues. She was an athlete, and over time, just the wear and tear on her knees. And it was determined that she needed surgery because she had an issue with her meniscus, but she was a little stubborn and really didn't want to go with that form of therapy for her knee. So instead, she started taking yoga. And through the regimented, controlled stretching, consistent stretching that yoga provides, very similar to the lunge that I demonstrated, over time, she found that she had less pain in her knee, and eventually, 6 months later, the pain had gone away. And even to this day, she's no longer needed that surgery. So that was just amazing that through a regimented yoga practice, she practiced 3 or 4 times a week through that slow, controlled movement and stretching, that she was able to rehab her knee and not have to go forward with the surgery. So I always recommend to people, try it, see if it works for you. And it may not be the, cure-all for all of your ailments, but definitely the flexibility around the joints is very, very important.
That's a wonderful story.
It
Thank
is.
you. So tell us, Yang's is a big fitness and wellness center. What other exercises are there, just generally, that our boomer audience could benefit from?
Sure. Tai Chi is a Chinese form of martial arts and therapeutic exercise. And a lot of baby boomers really gravitate towards Tai Chi because Tai Chi, a little different from yoga, does not always involve a lot of movement from standing to lowering themselves to the ground. So most of Tai Chi is done standing, and it's a choreographed set of therapeutic exercises. So that program generally attracts a lot of baby boomers. Then we also have other fitness classes that are entry-level fitness classes, depending on the person's interest, would be appropriate for them, such as Group Active, which is a 20-20-20 class, 20 minutes of cardio, 20 minutes of weight training, 20 minutes of balance, core, and flexibility. Bar None, which is a dance-inspired class. And we also offer personal training where a trainer can actually work specifically for your needs.
Sounds good. So, we have time for one more question. I'm wondering, you're a co-owner of this wonderful facility. What is your overall fitness philosophy?
It's never too late. Oftentimes we hear from baby boomers who have never joined a fitness facility, not that you need to become active, but they feel like it's too late for them to become active. I say first, it's never too late. Secondly, find something you enjoy. If you don't enjoy it, you're not going to do it. And just to be active, find something you love, commit to it. So those are my 3 top, advice that I would give to someone is find something you like, commit to it, and also, it's never too late.
Very wise words for our audience. Thank you so much for being with us today, for that wonderful demonstration, and for all your words of wisdom.
Thank you very much for having me today.
And thanks for being with us on Boomer Being. See you next time.